2 of the season 4 finale of the breakthrough season. And of course, again, we had a lot of questions leaving the last part going into the final part, to the second part of this finale. But like again, I said, how will the TV pilot go? Will the show get picked up? Will Jerry be able to feel comfortable and get along with TV Elaine? Will Kramer be able to go to the bathroom again? What will happen with Elaine and her complaint against the equal employment people about what's going on at Monk's? What will happen with George's biopsy results, as well as he frets over that? What will happen in general? And also, what will happen with Russell Dalrymple? He's been acting very strange, especially since he's been very depressed over Elaine not wanting the second date with him, which is unfortunate. But we all find out in part 2 of the pilot and the season finale of the season 4, the breakthrough season in Seinfeld. And like I said in the last part, this 2-part episode aired as a 1-hour special at 8 o'clock on a Thursday night when it first aired, because it was also taking place on the same night as Cheers. But the ratings were just off the roof for this show. They were spectacular. But let's talk about it. Let's get into it. So it starts off with the Jerry crew rehearsing the pilot. George, though, interrupts the show, thinking that everyone stinks, and he even, of course, intervenes with director Tom Sharones, who played himself. As you know, he's director several times in several of the episodes, but he also, of course, was acting as a director for Jerry. And he is, having a conversation with Tom Pepper, who he's already not getting along with well because of the whole raisins incident. He's telling him how to say the lines, which he basically tells him, I'm going to say the lines how I want to, which apparently was a real conversation that took place between Larry David and Michael Richards, apparently, and his people aren't getting along. That Rita Kierson, who sat in for Russell at the one meeting, whenever he was telling him the final idea for the pilot script and whatnot, is already showing that she just does not, she's not a fan of the show at all. And Russell is sitting there very, quiet, which also, there is a shot where you see the 4, executives that are the characters sitting in front, but further back, you see about 3 other people also, which are the real-life executives, which I know Warren Littlefield's there, I think Rick Ludwin, I can't remember who else, there was 3 of them sitting further back you can't even see. But Russell seems very distracted, and he said he'll be right back. He's going to go, he has to go do something. But of course, George is continuing to piss off people, and then Jerry's telling him to lay off on it, on what he's doing. Russell then picks up the phone, and he calls, first, I'm sorry, I missed this scene. First, Jerry is sitting there with Sandy, a.k.a. TV Elaine, and she's like, what's the matter? You're acting odd. Are you breaking up with me? And then Jerry is confused because, yes, they went out to dinner once, and yes, she kissed him. But obviously, Jerry had no interest in even calling it a relationship. And he's just like, I don't know what you're talking about. Do you want me to break up with you? She's like, if you want to break up with me, just break up with me. And Jerry's just like, okay, fine, we're broken up. Like, we weren't even dating in the first place, basically. And then she, of course, goes, can we still be friends? And Jerry has this priceless look on his face like, what the hell is going on here? It's like he was confused as to what it is, even though, of course, Russell, is obsessed with Elaine. TV Elaine, though, is obsessed with Jerry, and she took it as they were actually dating, but Jerry was like, we went out one time, and he's just like, I don't get what just happened here. He broke up with someone he wasn't even considering himself with. So, of course, that's all happening. And also George says something to Tom Pepper also about the raisins, in which he takes offense to that. He basically tells George doesn't like him and, stay out of his way and leave him alone. And then we see Russell calling Elaine again. He just calls him and just is desperately, begging her for another shot. He wants, a second date. and he was just like, "What is it? Is it my job? Let me make it right. What is it that I need to do to basically have you?" And he's like, he's going nuts about her. He can't get her out of his mind, even though the only shot they show was of Elaine at the of like the flashbacks of like what he thinks of, and of course it had to show the fact of that day at Pfeiffer's where Elaine purposely wore a low cut dress to make a point for Jerry and George, but ever since then Russell's been like stuck on her. But of course Elaine basically wanted nothing to do with it, and she basically hung up on him. Russell, hitting rock bottom. There was a crew member who walked past Russell and bumped into him, and he was just like, "What's your name?" And then the guy even apologized. He said David Richardson. He goes, "Get out, you're fired." But he's like, "But Mr. Dalrymple," and he's like, "Don't talk back to me. Did you hear what I said? Get out. You want me to call the cops? I make and break little worms like you every day. Do you know how much money I make? Do you have any idea? Do you know where I live? I can have any woman in this city I want. Anyone. Now get out!" Which Richardson then goes to leave, and everybody's just quiet looking over at Russell. He's like, "What are you all looking at? Get back to work!" And of course they do, and then Russell just walks away looking completely depressed and defeated. Unfortunately, next time we saw him, it was not good news. Which we'll get to that, of course, at the end of the episode. And then the next day, obviously, Jerry and George are sitting there realizing that, they're doomed. Like nobody's getting along. George's still freaking out because the lab is backed up with his test results on his discolored lip from his biopsy. Jerry, knows he can't act. He's complaining about TV Elaine. George is saying how him and Tom Pepper aren't getting along and whatnot. And then they're just going back and forth how and George, of course, says if the show succeeds, I'm gonna I'm still gonna die because I'm gonna have a terminal disease and whatnot, as he's thinking. So again, they were just bickering about all that. Then in comes Kramer, who is still having no luck with going to the bathroom again. And Jerry suggests he may have to consider the dreaded apparatus, which, Kramer was just like, "Oh no, not that." But of course he had no choice. He eventually had to do it, and it did help him. And Elaine comes in and mentions that the investigation for Monks has been filed, and the investigation is underway. Jerry, of course, asks Elaine if she's going to be coming to the taping tomorrow, and she's like, "Nah, she really doesn't want to bump into Russell," and tells him how he called again the other day and he won't quit. And then Jerry was like, "He's harmless. He's got a little crush on you," which Elaine's like, "This is not a crush. This is a complete fixation. Like, am I really that attractive that a guy can't live without me?" And it makes her very uncomfortable at how they want them there. Which of course she then eventually would come, except she put on a disguise, which, funny enough, she was concerned about running into Russell, but she also was not concerned, didn't know that Crazy Joe Davola was going to be there also. But then they asked Kramer if he wants to go, but he goes, "No, I'm going to stay home. He wants to be close home base in case there's any news from the front." Of course, in the blooper reel, he forgot his line. He goes, "In case if and just walks out because he forgot his line, but didn't want to admit it, even though, of course, it worked. But it was the front that he was backed up, not the back. But he eventually does go with the dreaded apparatus, and it does work. He got it while the filming was going on, and that's that. With that. But meanwhile, back at the taping, everybody's getting makeup on. Again, Sandy's, again in the mood of like, I want to be called Elaine and nothing else. George tries wishing Tom Pepper good luck, which after he had called and got his test results and they came back negative, which at first George thought that meant he had something, he's freaking out, but then he realized he's okay. So he's like, "Oh, I freaked out over nothing, so I'm good." And he talks to Tom Pepper, but still got nothing past him. He was just like, "Wish you good luck," but and even if he did take the raisins, and it was just like, ugh. And of course, Michael Barth, who played George, was freaking out because he couldn't remember his lines. But Jerry was saying, "Hey, you're in character. You're acting just like George." And then he gives him his first line, which is "new sneakers," which of course worked out well. Elaine, of course, shows up again and she's wearing like a disguise, like wearing a blonde wig and glasses and all that stuff, but yet somebody recognized her. Some guy named Wilton Marshall recognized her. And then also it was shown that Russell was not there, and I think Stu said that he thinks it has something to do with a woman, and of course Rita, of course, is like pathetic. Like Rita just always instantly seemed like bad news, and she was bad news, of course, at the very end. But they do the introductions and everything. But while Jerry's introducing himself and mentioning how they're doing this pilot, hope it becomes a TV series, Crazy Joe Davola just jumps up and he screams out something, whatever the stuff that he said in Latin that John Wilkes Booth said before he shot President Lincoln back in 1865. And I guess he jumps over the audience and onto the stage. I guess they must have arrested him or what, because the show still went on, of course. But then back at the apartment, days later, the four of them got together to watch the show together. Kramer, of course, was feeling better. Everybody's excited, but of course, they also mentioned how Russell didn't show up at the tapings. And then when they go to sit down, this was all like everything from season 4 just like wrapped up together in this one scene. Because when they sit down, I think one of them reach into the cushions and they pull out a wallet, which happened to be Morty Seinfeld's wallet, the same wallet that he had thought he lost at the doctor's office back in the wallet episode earlier in the season. So they got that. They start watching the show. It was pretty funny. But throughout, while the show's going on, they're showing like other people like throughout season 4 that they encountered. Of course, that don't like them now. Watching it. So the first one was Allison and Susan. They were watching it. We saw the Bubble Boy and his parents watching it. We saw Sidra, the one from the implant, who Jerry wanted to know if they were real or fake. And she's sitting there with that writer, that guy who looks like that writer who Kramer thought it was, who ended up being a Sal Bass. And he even also tried mentioning, started the same conversation about trying to find out if hers were real or fake, just like Jerry did. We see Marla, the virgin, in bed, and she's watching it with JFK Jr. We also see Ping and his cousin Cheryl, who was attracted to Jerry because he was dark and disturbed. We see one of the guys from Calvin Klein and Tia, the model Jerry on the plane, who thinks Jerry picked his nose. Of course, seeing Jerry's parents watching. Of course, only one who, of course, wasn't watching what we saw was Newman, who fell asleep during it. I'm sorry, he was watching the baseball game, because we hear something about Don Mattingly and everything. But the show looked to be pretty good, and people thought it was great. It seemed it was getting good responses, and everything. But then they instantly get a call. It's Rita Kierson from NBC. She calls to inform them that Russell no longer works with NBC. They have no clue where he is, but he's disappeared, and he's no longer president. Rita was just made president. And of course she mentions, and it was very obvious from every time we've seen her, that her and Russell did not see eye to eye on many projects. Those first order of business as president of NBC, she's passing on their show. And she basically says, "Bye, Jerry," and hangs up. As soon as that happens, because they're just about to go out to celebrate, all 3 minutes just look at Elaine. And she's like, "What? Why are you looking at me?" And they say, "It was you." And of course, again, this is karma coming back, because Elaine was the one that saved them from losing the pilot. Yet her doing that caused Russell to just fall madly in love with her. And now, because he's all depressed that Elaine doesn't want him, it caused them to lose a TV series. And and of course, again, they're wondering, what happened to him? Like, where is he? And again, Jerry says, no one knows. And nobody knows except for Russell himself. Because in the next scene, it shows, remember in part 1, when him and Elaine were at McManus's, and she basically, even though she thought Russell was just odd and creepy, he basically tries to cover up that she does all that by saying that basically that it's his job and she's not into television. And she said that something like, maybe if he worked for something like Greenpeace, it'd be something different. Well, sure enough, Russell takes that literally and joins Greenpeace. So he's out there in the ocean. He's riding the raft. He's just telling them all about Elaine, how she works for Pendant Publishing. She's the most beautiful woman he's ever met. and he says, he used to work for NBC, but this time when he goes back and she sees what he did, she'll respect him and everything. The two guys, which actually, believe it or not, were Larry David and Larry Charles, were in the raft with him. They tell him to get down, they're about to start firing. They then, of course, cut back to Monk's, where the four of them are still go to Monk's to still eat, to celebrate how good the pilot was, even though the show didn't get picked up. And of course, at first they come in though, and Elaine thought there was an investigation going on. And the same guys who said they were going to be investigating were there eating and saying that the service is great and everything like that. And so Elaine was upset, and she tells the manager he's not getting away with this. And then she even just flat out says, like, he's like confused, like, what are you talking about? And he says, with how alike all your waitresses are, he goes, oh, of course they're all alike. They're my daughters, which is like, that makes sense why they're all alike, because they're all his daughters, so it's not, discrimination, it's a family business now. So Elaine was just like, okay, yeah, I get it now. So they sat down, they had Peggy, their waitress. Then, of course, George sits down and starts mentioning how, tomorrow's going to start looking for a job because, well, since the pilot didn't get picked up, he has no job. Back to being jobless again. And again, that's where Kramer starts talking about Greenpeace also, how, you should go work for Greenpeace. And then that leads to the final scene, the sad scene, where it's showing the two rafters, which again were played by Larry David and Larry Charles, holding onto a rope, trying to pull in Dalrymple, who fell off the raft. And he was struggling to, to get back up and to get back on the raft. Well, the rope broke, and unfortunately they knew Dalrymple was doomed. And one of the guys said that, he'll write to her. He remembers the name, Elaine Bennis. He'll tell her all about what he did out there. And they say goodbye. And then the last shot was, you hear Russell in the background struggling, say goodbye. And, as of course obviously implying that Russell Dalrymple unfortunately drowned in the ocean, they also see a copy of the Jerry pilot floating off into the sunset. Such a sad way to end it, but just like the lengths that and I feel so bad for Dalrymple, but man, the lengths he went just for Elaine to lead to his own death was just sad. But just the man was crazy. But it was a sad ending, of course. I mean, obviously that's not what happened with the real life Seinfeld episode, but they obviously had to find. Obviously, that was the end of the story arc, and the whole series was going to be about them writing a pilot. So it was going to continue, and it had to be a different story, so they had to end it some way. But of course, here and there, they would tease, the pilot coming back. Like, I think there was one episode in The Checks where they tried to pitch it to these people, see if this one company in NBC would pick it up. And this one Japanese company would pick up the pilot, but eventually, of course, NBC does reach out to them in the finale. But we'll get to that later on and see what all went down with that. But this was not the last we heard of the Jerry Show. I do find it a little odd, though, they also only called the show just Jerry. Like, they should have had, maybe, All About Jerry, or, The Life of Jerry, or, I don't know, some of them were creative. Just Jerry, to me, I feel like I think of, a kid's show. I don't know why. But, yeah, that's season 4. Again, great season. Again, breakthrough season. There's a lot of episodes from this season that just I think of so many references. There's so many standout Seinfeld moments in it. I've said many times this season. This was the one, of course, where it led to Seinfeld being moved to the premiere spot on Thursday nights. It definitely saved NBC for sure, as they didn't really have much to really make them look good, really, since Cheers was completing. So this is when Seinfeld became the show. We had the contest, we had the storyline arc, we had the airport episode, the outing, we had George having the off and on relationship with Susan. We had the handicap spot introduction of George's parents that were introduced on camera. A lot happened in season 4, and season 5, of course, is going to be just very great as well. There's a lot of episodes that I stand out to me with season 5 also, and I can't wait to get to season 5. Of course, that'll have to be in a week or so because I'm getting ready to go away today for a business trip. So we're going to wrap it up here. So guys, that's part 2 of the pilot. That's end of season 4 of Seinfeld. What were your thoughts on the pilot episode for both parts 1 and 2? What are your thoughts overall on season 4? Do you agree it is the best season, of course, in Seinfeld? As I said also in a couple episodes also, I share some stories, at times that, made me think of the ideas because of Seinfeld episodes. Do you guys have any of those stories? Make sure to leave your thoughts, of course, down in the comments section below. Be sure, as always, to slap a like on the video, subscribe for more content to my channel, and follow me on Twitter at DemandAirboy93. Until then, guys, checking out. See you guys again sometime soon. Have a great rest of your day. Catch you on the flip side. Have a good week, guys. Peace out, everybody.
No